It's funny, somebody sent me a link today to an interview of a man in Ottawa who, with a group of other people, managed to generate over $150,000 for the people who are peacefully, legally protesting our current dictatorship, and they had their bank account frozen. They were going to go to the bank and get out drafts made for numerous names of people who are there entrenched, fighting for our rights, and they are have next to nothing now, and the government stole their money. It's pretty scary. It's pretty scary what they're doing right now. They're making it so that you can't voice your opinion, you can't voice your rights, you can't fight back. The mainstream news is bought by the government using our money, so they won't cover it, the magnitude of it. What else? You can't speak the truth online, or they'll delete your Facebook, they'll delete your YouTube channel, you'll delete your Instagram. Now they're taking your money, they're actively freezing your bank account if you voice against the dictatorship currently in Canada. And it's amazing to me, what's also very surprising is how many people actually don't care. They just don't care, and they get mad at people like myself for voicing out the truth. I even had somebody the other day complain to me on Instagram. They said, I'm getting sick and tired of all this freedom shit. When are you gonna start posting cool stuff again? I just couldn't believe the words I'm hearing and seeing these lately. Sick and tired of all this freedom shit. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that absolutely amazing? It's amazing how many people don't care. They don't fully comprehend, understand what's going down. I'm quite certain if mainstream news covered what is going down today properly, the whole country would uprise and change everything for the better in probably a matter of days. Very frustrating times. Sarah's stressed out. If I go back east, we'll get my bank account frozen, possibly get arrested. We'll see. I'm patiently waiting the correct time to move, how to move, and I will when the time is right. And in the meantime, I continue to keep everybody informed and aware when I can, however I can, via my social media platforms. But anyway, in the meantime, I'm going to continue to get every single person's voice heard here. What I do here with this channel as well is when I ensure that every single person who emails me gets heard, it solidifies that we're being lied to. Okay? Not everybody's mind goes there once they've been inducted into the club of no return. They don't all go automatically go, holy shit, we are being lied to, we are being misled. Not that many people's mind does it. I don't know why. Most people tend to just stay tunnel vision focused on Sasquatch and that's it, without really acknowledging the fact that we're being lied to. So, one thing that my share of all these emails does is it brings out the fact that we are being lied to, okay? Why that fact alone makes people angry that I pointed out, I haven't a clue. Will I stop? Of course not. So, let's get some more truth shared, which is as well more facts that you and I have been misled since we were this big. All right? Meantime, yeah, I'll stop right there and let's get some voices heard. This is titled, Possible Giant Caught on Camera by U.S. Military, the Towers Tank Next To. And there's a link to a YouTube video. My brother from another mother. I am Pat here in Phoenix, Arizona. Feel free to use my name or email as I'm 61 years old. I don't freaking care what anyone thinks or says about me. I've had a couple of encounters with Saturday in Lawson National Forest, Northern California, while stream fishing for brookies and rainbows back in 72, 73. Both times the forest was deafening with absolute silence. The silence and seeing the huge hairy guy looking through the thick bush at me. I was 12 years old. He scared the living shit out of me. I literally pissed my pants. The big guy never moved, made any sounds, just stared at me. He had brown hair, I think brown eyes. Freaking terrifying and too close for comfort for sure. I didn't hang around. I grabbed my stringer of fish, 6 trout, and turned toward the trail alongside the creek, and wet pants and all, and ran as fast as I could back to camp. My dad was at camp and I came running up and said, "You see a bear?" I just nodded my head yes and left it at that. The next year, same stream, same camp, basically had the same experience. Quite uneventful compared to many stories I've heard you read. Hey, I am cool with uneventful when it comes to a savvy encounter. I hope to never run into one of these beings ever again. Flat out, scary, freaking, huge beings. I never go in the woods alone or without my .357 Desert Eagle with bear loads in the clip holster to my side. I don't stay out in the woods overnight anymore, as in northern Arizona, there is sabays in the forest here too. I've seen tracks. I can't stomach the thought of them sneaking around my tent possibly. No thanks. You've talked about portals, and ran across a video on YouTube filmed by a soldier in night vision of big sabay walking around a parked tank, and this thing appears out of nowhere and disappears, vanishes on camera before your eyes. Really a rare occurrence, as it's the only video I've ever seen of one just appearing from like under the tank and then disappearing into the ground next to the tank. Really spooky shit. Take a look at this mind-blowing video, and it should be seen by the people of the round table. Yes, they have some kind of something they can access to vanish into thin air. I'm sending you the YouTube link. Check this shit out. A real good piece of the puzzle. Thanks for all your hard work you do. And keep your head on a swivel, as I think you have them lying bastards in power looking at you closely. F them. You cannot censor the army of the round table. Never will we stand for it. We will fight and we will win. I love your Camaro, badass ride. I have a 68 SSL Camino with a 60 over 454. Love them big blocks. Cool, man. Love to hear it sometime. Peace, Steve. Pat Dooley out. Pat, appreciate that, man. Appreciate the share. Isn't it funny, Pat, yourself, myself, many other people, when they say I'm X amount of years old and I'm far too old to give a shit what anybody thinks. Too bad we couldn't encourage the younger generation to not give a shit about what anybody thinks when it comes to the herd. Too bad, huh? Maybe we can. Maybe me doing this and you doing this and all these other people doing this. Maybe that'll help. What else do we have here? 1979 Thanksgiving Sabay sighting. Dear Steve, can't say enough about the things about your channel. It's by far my favorite channel and subject on television. You've been on one of your adventures during the last week, and my wife and I have been anxiously awaiting your return. We're excited to hear and see what you experienced while you were away. This may be long, but I think it's worth the read. What's the date on this? This is September 18th, 2021. Shit, I've had many experiences with Sabby in my life, and that's why I can confidently call them what they are. Most of these experiences were while I was hunting alone, but many happened when my wife and I were together, hunting and fishing, etc. This particular experience happened on Thanksgiving Day 79, when I was hunting alone in the Absaroka Mountains, south of Livingston, Montana, where I was living and working at the time. I and two of my so-called friends left my home very early that Thanksgiving morning and drove the 30 or so miles to the turnoff that took us into some very beautiful but rugged mountains. It had snowed more than a foot the night before, which made for a challenging and interesting drive in. I was chained up on all four tires, but still had a couple close calls on the narrow trail. I drove as far up as I could before I eventually got stuck, mostly because of how steep the trail was. I wasn't too worried about getting unstuck because I knew I could get back to a turnaround spot I just passed. So I parked and got busy gathering my gun, gloves, backpack, etc. I looked at my friends, LOL, and told them to hurry and get ready and let's go. We had drank a few beers the night before, and without looking at me, they both told me they wouldn't be able to make it. I had already made that assumption, so I was not surprised. I shut my Jimmy door and started walking. The snow was deep, making for tough walking, and there were drifts even deeper I had to get through, sometimes to my waist. I guess I had gone about a mile after an hour struggling when I glanced the side hill of the mountain in front of me, about a quarter mile, and spotted what looked like tracks from a small herd of elk headed toward a pocket of timber down from me and to the right. I figured they were bedded down in the timber, so I hiked down a ways and took up a position that allowed me to see about 250 degrees from my left around to my right that covered that whole pocket of timber. I had a big tree behind me and huge boulders behind that. I could only stand because the snow was so deep, but I could see everything of interest very well. I'd been there for at least a couple hours when I started hearing voices. There was a large drainage around to my right, about 200 yards running straight away from me, and I thought it might be where the voices were coming from. It turned out I was right. Just above the drainage was a huge park, mostly flat, between me and the pocket of timber where I believe the elk were bedded. The park was about 50 yards from me, and then a couple hundred yards to the pocket, and probably twice that from the drainage to the heavy timber in front of me. I was listening hard and watching the drainage when I started smelling cigarette smoke coming from the same place as the voices. I immediately thought it was my two buddies because they both smoked. Not only were they talking very loud, but the smoke was so strong I knew if there were elk anywhere around, they wouldn't be for long. But good luck getting a shot. I was watching the drainage very closely when suddenly out popped a sabe moving at full speed. I guess it was full speed because it sprinted that 400 to 500 yards in the deep snow, taking no more than 15 seconds. Can you imagine seeing that? When he came out of the timber in the drainage, I must have gasped or something because without losing stride, it turned its head and looked directly at me. I feel like it marked me because I continue to have experiences involving them to this day. No, I don't like it or want it. I know they do not have good intentions. It had longish dark brown or black hair all over its body. I would say it was anywhere between 9 to 10 feet tall with long legs that easily ran through probably 3 feet of snow amazingly quick. It had a dark but sort of human-like face that showed expression as it looked towards me. The voices I had heard were from two hunters, or should I say two morons, that after about 5 minutes, while I was still trying to process what I'd just witnessed, walked up and out of that same drainage about 75 yards closer to me than the sabe. They hadn't seen anything, not even the trail where it had come out and ran, but they tried to walk the same direction anyway. Hunting, I guess, with no clue, but I could see their struggle to make it even 10 yards, and they turned around and followed their own tracks back into the drainage. I could hear them talking for another 30 minutes at least. Unbelievable. I didn't bother trudging through that deep snow to go down and look at the tracks. I was already wore out and already knew for certain what I had seen. I finally got back to my Jimmy and was happy to see my buddies were pretty mad and cold. I'd taken the keys with me on purpose. And as expected, after giving a detailed account of my experience, they laughed and joked about it all the way home. Needless to say, but as you say, I threw them to the curb. Sorry it's so long, but I hope it was worth it. It was to me because, like you, my wife and I are knowers to the 10th degree. Thanks, Steve, for all you do. ARC and DLC. Okay, man? That must have been quite the sight to see one of those things covering that distance so effortlessly, right, in deep snow. And when they look straight at you, I've had numerous people email the same fact. A friend of mine here in British Columbia, same deal. I'll never forget his description because I was basically hunting them, basically not the exact same area, but very near where he was when he put the scope on that thing and he was down in the drainage running through the basin, and he said it looked straight back at him in the eye through his scope. And he was just sitting there motionless, hunkered down in the rocks, all camoed up. Numerous times, numerous people say the same thing. No matter how far away those things are, they turn, they look straight at you in the eye as they're moving or running away or walking away or just standing there looking at it. Too bad you should have just taken your buddies straight down there and showed them the tracks. I would have smartened them up, right? Thanks for that share. And there's another one. More people in the Club of No Return. Shining stars illuminate Sabe. This is sent January 12th, 2022. Hello, Steve. Thanks for your channel's continuing endeavor to allow so many people to express their negative life effects after their encounters with Sabe/Sasquatch. This is my first email to your channel. If you read this email, I'll ask you to not use my legal name, but instead use the Cherokee Nation name my mother gave me. It is Shining Stars. I also ask that you keep all my contact and personal information for your eyes only. You got it, man. I always do. Steve, I sincerely apologize for the length of this share. Following instructions to send it in regardless of the length. Presenting encounters in 6-second sound bites is a recipe for total miscommunication. Hopefully there are other members who have similar experiences. This email will resonate and stimulate their memories, or motivate them to also share their encounter. Your channel was not sought out by me. Nevertheless, your channel found me through YouTube over my Roku television unit. Over the decades, I've watched many movies, television specials, and redundant television series about Bigfoot with a repulsive name. What a repulsive name. I found nearly all to be repugnant, silly, unreal, or outright false characterization of what my gut was indicating to be reality. Your channel has been a breath of fresh air for me since April 2021. My daily consumption of your videos continues up to the present. It has been the catalyst that has brought together the last segment of my puzzle pieces. Yes, I've had savvy experiences. 4 experiences so far over the last 6 decades. These are encounters I did not seek, want, or understand. I've never seen a savvy. I've only experienced their vile and ruthless nature. My situation is complicated by sporadic and randomly occurring paranormal experiences since the age of 3. Included this time are my first 2 encounters. They occurred 9 years apart and in the same general geographic area. Steve also included are some of my puzzle pieces. All my puzzle pieces are based upon my many sources of input, including my experiences, many months of viewing your channel, Scott Carpenter's, Dave Plaza's channels, my analytical skills, learned or refined over the last many decades, and many other sources. My firm belief in Savvy's existence has only been solidified during the last 2 to 3 years. Why? Apparently I was not allowed to remember and truly understand my encounters, the linkage between them, and to know the abundance of proof that exists about their reality. Shining Star Encounter. My savvy experiences began at age 7, roughly 6 years before the Patterson film was known. My first experience was indirect because my father took the brunt of the encounter. My mother, younger siblings, and myself were in a vehicle approximately 150 feet away from my father. My father was an avid trapper, fisherman, and hunter since his childhood. He was in his early 50s at the time of this encounter. I strongly believe now this was just one of several savvy encounters my father experienced. He was raised and lived in Central Plains State all his life. Although he traveled to surrounding states very often in his younger years. I was born and raised in the same state, only moving away to the East Coast when in my 30s. The area is mostly rural, with small towns sparsely dotting a 50 square mile area. Only 2 large towns were present. My father was a no-nonsense person. He was intelligent and educated, having earned in the late 20s what would today be considered a 2-year associate college degree in engineering. He was a sheriff's deputy for a few years in the late 30s, World War II veteran, having served in the Pacific Theater, and was honorably discharged from the rank of Master Sergeant. He spent the remainder of his working life as a machinist for an industrial equipment manufacturer. Anger was not his forte, respect was. He would only give back what was given. He was able to succinctly sum up a situation and with strength and bravery act upon it if needed. He was a welcoming person and at ease with others, yet he would never trap, fish, or hunt again after this event. The savvy encounter that day started as a family shopping trip to a nearby town. On the way home, my father announced he needed to run the traps he had set out and collect them. This is out of character for him in his trapping endeavors. Arriving at the site, he parked the car on the side of a 1.5 lane gravel country road that had deep drainage ditches on both sides. Leaving the rest of us waiting in the car, my father stepped out of it, dressed in suit, pants, dress shirt, autumn leisure jacket, dress hat, and street shoes. Also, he had a .22 caliber revolver holstered to his hip, not his typical wilderness attire. He entered a recently reclaimed multiple miles square section of land to the right of the vehicle. Thousands of trees, ferns, and bushes had been planted in the area a few years prior and had grown tall and wide. Underbrush had grown and thickened, standing several feet tall. You could only see a dozen feet into the field at any point along the road. Quite some time had passed, and my mother became agitated, then angry, then fearful. She seemed somewhat perplexed by her emotions, stating so a couple times. I remember my head becoming stuffy, sinuses partially closing, some hearing abnormalities, and sleepy. My mother rolled down her window and loudly called my father's name. There was no response. Several minutes passed and she did the same again, only louder. And there was no response from my father. She waited a while longer and again yelled out my father's name even louder, adding she was getting cold and not feeling well. I was becoming concerned, if not frightened and confused. Shortly, there was a gunshot and then silence. My mother said something that was inaudible to me. Then there were several more gunshots and then silence. The silence was again broken by several more gunshots. There was a long silence. My mother opened her car door about a foot. When roughly 20 feet in front of the vehicle, my father came crashing through the trees and underbrush, jumped the drainage ditch, and ran towards the car with his revolver still in his hand. He jumped into the driver's seat, started the engine, and roared out of the area. All this was completely out of character for my father. I remember my mother immediately questioning my father, yelling about his driving and interrogating him all at once. My father was scared, confused, uncertain, and stuttering. This behavior was also out of character for my father. I do not remember the full exchange between them. I remember my father saying it was huge, a monster, stinky, loud, and angry. He was confused at times, saying he shot it, then other times saying he shot at it, other times saying he could not hit it, and that it caused him to empty his gun. I remember him saying it chased him around inside the area, that he was confused and could not find his way back to the car, that it chased him towards the car. My parents' relationship took a drastic and irreversible downward spiral that day, never to recover. That sucks. Alcoholism mushroomed for both of them. It's so sad to read that. My family quickly and irreversibly shattered over the next few years. I fell asleep at some point, and I remember the trip home or the next several weeks. It's all a blank to me, and some of it is still a lost memory. All that transpired during that event faded from my memory for a long time. When it did resurface, it was only in small bits and pieces that lacked details and most meaning. I would not piece the event together until the last 10 years or less. Slowly the memories returned and finally remained accessible to me. My mindset when it came to these events and their memories was that it does not matter. Nothing to see here, let it go. This is completely different from my paranormal experiences, which are genuinely crisp, understandable, and have always been relatively easy to recall in detail and the emotional aspects of each event. Regarding my savvy experiences, a number of details have emerged during the last few months from watching your channel. There have been a number of shares by other members which have coincided with my experiences or provoked my memories of events to return. And I am grateful for them expressing their experiences and for you providing a platform for which millions of people have access to and the experiences. My parents did not discuss this event with me. I did ask about it a couple of times and I'd remember bits and pieces. Each responded with no memory of the event the first time, then on subsequent inquiries would respond with indignation that the subject was brought up and quickly changed the subject. Shining Star's second encounter. It happened 9 years later and half a mile from where our family encounter happened. As mentioned, my recollection of the first encounter was essentially missing from my memory for all this time and, except for a couple times in my 20s, it was missing for the next 25 or more years. Any memory of the initial encounter did not surface during this second encounter. It was hot mid-afternoon, midsummer afternoon. I was riding my smallish motorcycle this day, as I did for most days, usually in no predetermined direction. I was just exploring areas within 15 to 20 miles of home, in all directions, narrow, gravel, country roads that could be accessed with a mile or two of home. I rode west this day for no apparent reason. The area started out as farmland, with tree rows in between fields. With each passing mile, the farmland shrank and wooded areas grew. Several miles from home, I crossed a 60-foot long, one-lane, steel-framed, wooden plank bridge with a T-intersection in the road 20 feet west past the bridge. The bridge spanned a 30-foot wide creek with water usually 3 to 5 feet deep. I'd been in this area before. It was usually full of wildlife, such as squirrel, rabbit, songbirds, crows, chicken hawks, toads, turtles, frogs, and other sort of critters. This day, there were none. I parked my motorcycle just off center of the middle of the intersection. There was no vehicle traffic. There had never been vehicle traffic through that intersection. There had never been vehicle traffic through that intersection every time I'd been there. The creek ran in the general north/south direction. The forested area began about a mile east of the creek and stopped abruptly on the creek's east side. The forest area maintained this contour for several miles north and south along the creek. The west side of the creek was reclaimed land where thousands of trees had been planted years ago. Underbrush was everywhere and upwards to 5 feet tall. That day there was no wind that I noticed because the dust from my motorcycle seemed to linger in the air. The sky was mostly clear to my recollection. I milled around the intersection area for a while, doing what 16-year-olds do. I walked onto the bridge, picked a handful of rocks from the road as I walked. Reaching the middle of the bridge, I turned and faced south. I threw a couple rocks far down the creek into the water, listening to the sound they made to judge the water's depth. I turned and ran over to the north side of the bridge and performing the same activity with the last several rocks in my hand. The water was deeper going north. I became curious about where the creek ran to the north. I was well aware of its path to the south. Looking around, there was no access trails or pathways along either side of the creek to the north for my motorcycle to travel. I decided to ride around the section and try to find an access route to the north and follow back to the intersection I was at. I started walking on my motorcycle while thinking I would ride 2 miles west, then roughly 2 miles north, and then turn back east for a couple miles until I found the creek, then attempt to follow it back south to the bridge. As I neared the motorcycle, a loud cougar scream came from the wooded area north of the bridge along the creek and about 150 yards from the road. It was a long, drawn-out scream that rose in pitch and then descended in pitch, lasting 6 to 7 seconds. I was able to notice the scream stop, turn to my right, and to find roughly where the sound was originating. It was inside the tree line and several feet above the ground level. At that time, I was aware of the sound of a cougar scream. The cougars do not exist in this state. They definitely do not exist in the area where I live. Recently, I verified the last known cougar in that state was destroyed in 1904. It was not until the early 90s that cougar sightings were again made in the state, but these sightings were hundreds of miles from where I lived in 70. Furthermore, I have listened to scores of cougar, lion, tiger, bobcat, and other feline scream recordings, both actual and electronically produced. Regarding the cougar screams, none of those I listened to last for more than 3 to 4 seconds. Most last 1 to 2 seconds in duration. As I stood there after the scream ended, I decided to wait and see if the cat would scream again. This was to assure me that it was a cougar and to assist me to zero in on its location. I waited patiently. Probably a minute passed and there was no repeat of the sound. There were no sounds of anything. My curiosity was piquing. Why would the cat not scream again? A few more seconds passed, then there was an instantaneous wave of terror that hit me, then gripped me. I was paralyzed to the spot where I stood. Every hair on my body stood up and stiffened. Chills of fear and terror ran up and down my whole body. The only thought I had was that it, not the cougar, but it, was coming after me. Steve, my adrenaline flow was maxed out. I was shaking as I was standing frozen in place. Terror, fear, and panic were surging in my brain and in my body. The next thought that possessed me was to run, to get out of there, hurry, because there was no time to lose. My legs would not obey. Finally, one foot moved, then the other. I sidestepped to the motorcycle. My gaze was directed towards the blanketed brush and trees to my north. I jumped on the motorbike, kick-started, and sped off to the west as I managed to get the helmet on my head. The faster I rode, the greater the terror and fear that surged through me. This fear began to subside after a mile of riding. By the end of the second mile, I reached an asphalt road. I turned south and rode like the wind for another mile as the terror and fear continued to subside. At the end of the second mile was another intersection, east/west asphalt road. At this point, anger took over in me. I was angry at myself for being so childlike in my reaction to a sound. I was also angry at myself for having driven like a madman on a narrow, loose gravel country road. I turned eastward onto the second asphalt road. As I traveled this road, it seems I completely forgot about the incident that just happened at the bridge. About riding to the bridge, about my irresponsible riding on the gravel road. Also, at no time did the whole incident from the ride leading to the bridge and afterwards was I aware of the initial savvy encounter that was experienced in the same general area 9 years earlier. These two events would not be simultaneously remembered for several decades. Yet as these memories returned, I knew they were real. All right. Shining Stars puzzle pieces assembled. Steve, the following are my conclusions, which I refer to here as my puzzle pieces. These are not necessarily presented in a building block sequence where one puzzle piece leads to the next puzzle piece and so on. My conclusions are as good as the knowledge presented by the club members, since I have relied strongly on their expressing their experiences. The experiences are in line with the experiences I have had and the knowledge I know to be true. My puzzle pieces are, in effect, a cross-sectional analysis based upon information from many hundreds, if not thousands, of individual experiences. Puzzle piece number 1. There are distinctions between Sabe. It is my viewpoint that these people too have different levels and classifications. I can differentiate up to 5 classes. Only 2 will be discussed at this time. Many people seem to have encountered what I call the warrior class. These are mostly scouts, sentries, those who ward off intruders, take back areas and the like. These Sabe seem to roam in small bands. The second group I'll discuss are the type I seem to have encountered throughout my life. These are a vile and ruthless group, willing to do anything to any human at any time for any reason. This group I designate as mind assassins. They have special skills and abilities that are spread over a wide range of disciplines. This savvy category is honored and refined special innate and learned abilities that are above and beyond the normal savvy skills and abilities. This group stalks, monitors, observes, and seek weaknesses in individuals to exploit. They do this while remaining hidden in the shadows and remaining anonymous. Puzzle piece number 2. The savvy encountered by me look for weaknesses in the individuals, assess their strengths, and attempt to gain an understanding of each individual. In short, they gather intelligence about individuals. They seek to disturb an individual in several ways, including emotionally, cognitively, and possibly physiologically. This group represents crafts of high order, specializing in deception, dishonor, and many other vile qualities. There are no actions they will refrain from. Puzzle piece number 3. The Sabe's psychic abilities are exceptional. While these abilities may not be of equal intensity throughout the Sabe community, the Mind Assassin group has exceptional abilities. I would agree with many other members of the Club in No Return that thought transfer, mind reading, hypnosis, the Sabe version of this art, with post-hypnotic suggestions and possibly other abilities are among their arsenal of techniques. These are highly cognitive abilities, knowledge, and expertise. Puzzle piece number 4. Sabe are energy beings just as humans are energy beings. Sabe resonates at certain frequencies just as humans resonate at certain frequencies. These frequencies cause vibrations both internally and externally. Sabe and humans are composed of a myriad of energies, frequencies, and vibrations for various biological, physiological, and psychological functions. Sabe seems to have an ability to skillfully use these frequencies and vibrations in a manner that alters our frequencies and vibrations, which then alters or changes our energy flows. Sabe can also affect our 5 senses through these alterations to our energy flows. A few of many variables Sabe can affect includes heart rate, blood pressure, muscular control, emotions, our 5 senses, and more. It's quite true, isn't it? Puzzle piece number 5. Sabe, as energy beings, do not create additional energy out of thin air on the spur of the moment. Sabe expend energy to utilize their special skills and abilities. The Sabe skills and abilities that have greater degrees of difficulty require Sabe to expend a greater amount of energy. To project their special skills and abilities in a given event for a longer time duration also requires a greater expenditure. Any extra energy utilized in these instances has to be drawn from other current Sabe energy reserves. Ultimately, Sabe has to replenish this energy. An essential question becomes, how taxing is this for Sabe? I believe Sabe needs some time in preparation. This could be hours, days, or weeks. The events mentioned on your channel by other members, plus my own encounters, indicates a limited amount of time in expending their special skills and abilities. I believe they also require recovery time period from the event. My encounters suggest there were more than one Sabe involved each time. Steve, thank you for the opportunity to put in writing into a concise and consistent manner some of the thoughts which have been churning willy-nilly in my head. Whether you read this or not, it is of importance that the person experiencing such events understands them and learns from the experience. What matters is that I am assured that these events were real, and I'm not making a mountain out of several molehills. These events occurred and had a significant impact upon my psyche, my life, and the lives of people around me. Furthermore, I understand that the true inner self is still aware of the activities in life, even if those events are hidden from the conscious mind on purpose. The true inner self is what you so aptly refer to as our sixth sense, or your gut feelings. This is our internal energy grid mixing with the energy grid from the environment around us and the external energy that flows through us. This inner self will move us towards the truth and into activities that will lead us to the truth, even when attempts are made to hide the truth from us. Right does not defeat wrong, and right does defeat wrong, and truth does overcome deception and lies. These opposing conditions have different energy fields, energy waves, energy frequencies, and vibrations that can be detected and known. Until the next time, best wishes to you and your family, shining stars. We did it, man. We got through it. It was a good long read. That's some real shitty news about your family. Now they reacted to their experience. That sucks. There's a lot of puzzle pieces in there, a lot of puzzle pieces observed or pointed out, isn't there? I think a small bird flew in right here and he's flown into the man cave. Just want to nest in here for the night. I just seen him come out of the corner of my eye and he went back and I could just heard him again. Unless you'll be safe in here for the night. What else do we got? All right, Mark, this is red. Man, I'm feeling shitty right now. Excuse me. This is titled Sasquatch Experience. Hi, Steve. After listening to the experiences, it has helped me to better understand things in my past. I was portaging near the French River in Ontario, Canada. We were where no one else goes. The wildlife numbers immediately go up with sunbathing snapping turtles and tadpoles galore. My girlfriend and I quietly approached two young moose in singular file standing at the edge of the slow-moving wide river. I stood up a bit in the canoe after we locked eyes with the moose, and they silently did a 180 and walked in unison into the bush. A couple miles later, we were going down the river, and all I could hear was activity just rampaging the forest, like a force dodging trees and flying low through the forest. I was getting the idea in mind that something powerful yet majestic was causing a commotion through the trees. I didn't fear it, but knew it was not normal. So we turned around and left. Things are bent. I listened to my intuition, not in fear, but knowing it wasn't a black bear or a bobcat or the wildlife in Ontario. I try to stay at peace and centered to simply absorb or observe. My family are hunters, trappers, and fishermen, so I have joined them many times in extremely remote locations. Never have I experienced this with them, nor on my own. So this experience, I can't explain it. It has to be a Sasquatch because of the energy sound and mental messages put in my mind. The area is owned by natives. It is very special as I have seen incredible light objects in the sky and did a meditation called CE5 and had an extremely advanced orange and red two-dimensional light object come very close over the beach as if to say, I heard you, and then shot off 0 to Mach 1000 at 1/10 of a second into the sky. There is no doubt now for me, I know. I've researched a bit to try to make sense of the Sasquatch working with the star people, or ET, or whatever you want to call them. Both seem to have interdimensional abilities and can put thoughts in our minds. I am in sincere place to understand what is possible. Thanks for all you do. I look forward to seeing what you two will be cooking up to with your healthy game meat and fish. I implore everyone to share their experiences to your channel in truth. It is time for everyone to know their higher self and connection with nature and the extraordinary, along with our incredible human spiritual capabilities. I'd like to leave you with this. The ancients have said, the time of awakening is here. Let the dawn come. Let the men of wisdom return. Be not afraid, be strong, be good and love. Happy fishing, Nicholas. Thanks, Nicholas. Appreciate that, man. Something's definitely here right now. Some kind of time is here now, and that is without a doubt. And those lights. The lights, I seen something in the sky one time hunting remote with a friend of mine. We watched it in broad daylight, and it was round, possibly like a pewter color. I don't know how far away it was. Quite a ways away. It just sat there forever, then it just left. And then we kind of looked at each other and just like, well, we see a UFO. There you go. Now what, right? But just the other night, Sarah and I were sitting on the back deck and looked across the valley behind our place. And way off in the distance, there was one hell of a bright light against what is the mountain. And I glanced over and I'm like, oh, that's a new one. I go, is that a new light? And then she looked at it, she's like, nope, that's a new one. And then it started moving to the left, and then it went up, and then it moved to the right and disappeared into the trees. And then about an hour later, helicopter comes through at nighttime, and the helicopter went back and forth in our valley about 8 times. It is what it is, right? Nothing you can do or say about it, or even look into it. And then sharing it right now, it's kind of like, well, what for? Saw a bright light in the sky moving, it disappeared, and then a helicopter came. Right? Yeah, the bright lights in the sky, they're a mystery. Alright, what do we got? One more, and then I gotta go in. I'm starting to frickin' spiraling. If only we knew the truth. Just want to start off with a quick thank you, Steve. I'd say it's about time someone's speaking the truth. My name is Mike. And I'm from the foothills of the Ozark Mountains in Missouri. I spoke with David P. from Missing 411 about my experience. Much like you, I've been hunting my whole life, as far as back as I can remember. There's 3 of us boys. My father made sure we were all hunters. I harvested my first buck with my bow when I was 11. Hunting was the only thing that us boys would get together for. Anyways, I'll try to keep this short as possible. I was hunting by myself like I've done 1,000 times before, on the same land I've been hunting since a boy. We had an 1,800-acre ranch that was all thick timber with 4 openings and lots of big steep hills. It was a beautiful place with a river running right through the middle of it. It was one evening, I was in my stand on an afternoon when I heard coyotes making some noises that I've never heard before. I thought nothing of it at the time. I knew right where the coyote den was. It was in an area where I've noticed a bunch of turkeys roosting in the trees. So I figured I would climb down right at dark, and I would walk down there and kind of see what was going on, and maybe see if I can catch a turkey still on the ground. When I got to that area, the first thing I noticed was all the noise had stopped. It was about as quiet as I've ever had experienced. No wind, nothing. By this time, it's starting to get so dark I could not see anything. No moon, no light, no nothing. Then out of nowhere, I hear this owl. So I take out my flashlight, click it on, and point in that direction and nothing. The noise I heard was an owl. The noise I heard was an owl, and it was close. So I was puzzled that I could not find the owl that was making the noise. So I turned off my flashlight again, and what happened next shook me to my core. That's when a ringing in my ears that I can't describe was so bad I had to set my bow down. Then it felt like 240 volts shot through me. I was frozen. That's when something or things were running all around me, and it felt like they were getting closer and closer. So close I could feel the wind from it going by me. So I mustered up all that I could and raised my arm and clicked my flashlight on. And what I saw will forever be burned in my nightmares. Words cannot describe what I saw. You cannot prepare yourself for something like this. The sheer size alone is frightening. What I can tell you is this: when you're looking at these beings, or whatever they are, and you feel what I felt, I started to weep. I can't explain why, but weeping uncontrollably, being scared and solely self-defense. I grabbed and raised my pistol. It let out a low growl, and I was frozen again. It slowly turned and started walking away. As it passed by this big oak tree, it was like it went through a doorway. and was gone. As I gathered myself, I began to sprint to my truck. And when I made it to my truck, the first thing I noticed when I opened the door was the time. Somehow I lost 4 hours. Then I noticed I was missing a layer of clothes. I had 3 layers of clothes on when I left the house and only had 2 on. I'm not sure what happened, but was too scared to tell anybody. Not sure why I'm telling you now. It still scares the shit out of me, and I've never been back. I'm not sure exactly what these things are, but they are far superior to humans. Steve, I want to thank you for everything you do. You're the only reason I was able to tell my story, and I hope, which it probably won't help anybody that listens. Sorry? And I hope, which it probably won't help anybody that listens. I would love to come down to your neck of the woods. Man, I might just do that someday. I'd love to go into more detail about what I saw. If you're interested, let me know. Mike. Man. That sucks, Mike. But, you know, it's not that experience and the outcome of those experiences similar to yours, they're not that common, but we've had far too many for it to be, I shouldn't say uncommon, but it's disturbing, right? Edgar is one of the main stories that stand out with that happening. Losing a lot of time, having his clothes rearranged on his body, missing some clothing, having his phone being welcome texted from over 30 countries, rapid fire on his cell phone, seeing that thing jumping up and down, starting to become translucent from the bottom up, and then looking at him and looking at him like I wanted to kill him. That's nothing for anyone to envy, and that experience isn't something you can just go up to the frickin' police station and report, right? Or even your average shrink. What are you gonna do with that experience, right? What are you gonna do with that experience? I ask that to every single person watching this video. What are you gonna do with that one? The more people share, the more we learn, the more we take note of. I hope you saw, I'd imagine you heard us share Edgar's story. I'm guessing you did. If I can think of it and remember it, I'll try to put maybe I'll put a link to that at the back of this video if I can remember to. I'm feeling like a sack of shit right now. And then you can listen to that and you can possibly relate that to what you experienced, right? And then trying to make sense of it isn't going to be that easy, I'll tell you what. How do you make sense of that one? Although a lot of the points being shared, they go into the vault, right? They go into the vault and they sit there stacked up, ready to cut loose on the rest of the puzzle when that 1 or 2 or 3 missing pieces comes in. But anyway, it's time to go in. See how I'm feeling tomorrow. Hopefully it doesn't get too much worse. Sarah just had like a ton of snot coming out of her nose and stuff right up for a few nights straight. It was pretty bad. I'm definitely not there yet. I don't feel stuffy at all. I just feel like I've been run over by a truck a little bit, but I'll be all right. But anyway, if any of you have it in you, I'd please encourage you to look into what's going on in Canada right now. It's not too good. It's a very sad shit show going on, and I don't know why so many people ignore it, but it's definitely something that it's amazing that people ignore what's going on today in Canada. It's absolutely amazing to me. It's alarming. But there's a lot of good people out there who are bringing light to the truths. And as long as they don't quit, I'm not going to quit. Well, I won't quit anyway. And we're going to slowly figure out how to fix the broken, fix what's wrong, and help the good people, right? Anyway, here I go. I will hopefully be back soon and make some more shares again and get more voices heard. All right? I'll talk to you guys soon.